of a series of research projects, and it's been co-sponsored by the Government of Canada. We have the pleasure to have several members of the delegation. The minister will give a few notes soon. We also have this event co-sponsored by Child Right, which is Canadian Institute of Health Research, a strategic patient-oriented research program. Sorry, that was a lot of words to interpret. And Kids Brain Health Network, which is a network of centers of excellence. Both networks are Canadian-funded research programs with a focus on developmental disabilities. And part of these initiatives include having what we call knowledge translations, a very Canadian term, but knowledge translation initiatives where we essentially want to talk with people, different stakeholders about the research we produce, but also engage in dialogue with parents, with policymakers, with children and youth, and with clinicians, healthcare, education professionals. So this is part of a series of successful attempts, and very glad that we have been able to develop these relationships and partnerships and collaborations to exchange ideas, and bottom line, to try to get to some actionable and good conclusions on how we can promote the rights of children with disabilities. This whole Conference of the States Parties has been on No One Left Behind, and with this idea, we know from the Canada perspective, and we would like to listen to all of you at the end, how we can include children so that they are also not left behind. We talked about women and children, and women and girls in general in the session, but children in general, they often fall in this intersect, right? There are two big human treaties, the Convention on the Rights of Children, the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and they have special considerations for children in both, of course, but we would like to think of solutions. And so what we try to present for you today, this panel, is a perspective coming from research. So we'll talk about the research project that we've been working on, and we want to talk about the lived experiences, which is for me the highlight of this all. So we have a panel here that I will quick introduce to you, and then we'll introduce themselves as they come up. We have the Honorable Minister Kirsty Duncan, who accepted to come and make remarks for us. We are very appreciative of having a minister who is so engaged and has been in this discussion with us for a while now, and who truly is interested in listening and sharing, and I think this is a great demonstration of this. We also have Nicholas, who is a member of the Canadian delegation as a youth representative, and Susan and Leon right here, and they'll all come up. I just want to introduce everybody. Rachel, myself, my name is Keiko Shikak-Thomas. I am a Canada Research Chair in Childhood Disabilities, and Jonathan Lay is over there taking care of the tech side, but he's also a postdoctoral fellow, and in Canada what we call the Health Systems Impact Fellow, so someone who has also been working close with making the system work for the best interest of children with disabilities. So, with no further ado, I will so pass the floor for our Honorable Minister, Kirsty Duncan, and she'll give a few remarks, and then we will get started.
On behalf of the government, and we're really pleased to be co-hosting this event on children with disabilities. I do want to recognize the work of Dr. Shikako Thomas. We've known each other for many years, and I've always appreciated her work, and I really want to recognize your research. She holds a very prestigious research chair in childhood disabilities at McGill University, and I also want to recognize Kids Brain Health and Child Right. I thank you for doing this because children matter. When I'm out in the community, I always say there is nothing more important in the world than children. And I tell them they are our future teachers, they're lawyers, our writers, and they are our leaders. And we're so lucky to be able to speak to Liam today. Yes, and we want to recognize, for those of you who don't know, Liam will soon be celebrating a birthday in 2 days. So a happy birthday. And we should also know that Liam loves politics, and Liam is so excited to be here at the United Nations. I also want to recognize tremendous leaders who are traveling as part of the Canadian delegation. And I'll recognize our Deputy Minister, Laurie Sterling, and I'd love to go around the table beside her. We have MJ. We always say Mary Jose, MJ. And I want to recognize our 3 youth leaders we've brought from Canada. Nicholas Harris is here, and he's on your panel. And I also see Robert Shaw, who is also doing his PhD, and who spoke at the Canadian mission this afternoon to a number of countries. And we also have Anne-Sophie Veron. I'll just finish by saying, I'm really here to listen to the research, and more importantly, to listen to your lived experience. It's up to all of us to make sure children have the best start in life and that they have the best chance to succeed. And I want you to know I'm very pleased to be here. I look forward to listening to you, and to, more importantly, Liam, to learning from you. So thank you.
Thank you. So we'd like to start by introducing you to some of the research that we have done. You have more information about the research programs on the table, but briefly we would like to present to you a review of the research literature that we have done on the rights of children with disabilities and what we can do, concrete steps and actions. So first, 1 in 6 children is affected by neurodisability, and autism, cerebral palsy, fetal alcohol syndrome are some of the examples. HDHD are more common, children that you see every day in our classrooms or every day in the community. So these children are the focus of our research programs, but they are also children who are out there, right, in the community, in schools, in the playgrounds, growing up in Canada as they are everywhere in the world. We know that access to diagnosis, treatment, and family support is often inconsistent, so that's a challenge that in research we're trying to address and consider how we can really promote rights, right? The right that every child has to go to school, to be with their family, to participate in communities of daily life, to be playing, right, where they want to make choices. Those are the choices that are related to rights and that we are trying to identify both in research and through our partnerships, how we can make this better. In terms of socioeconomic cost of neurodisability in Canada, there's over 20 billion per year, so it's a high investment, right, that the country does, and that we hope and expect that translates into a better quality of life for children and their families. The 2 networks that are represented here very quickly, Kids Bring Health Network, it's a trans-Canadian collaboration. There are over 200 researchers and associate investigators in the network, several non-for-profit organizations that are part of the network as well, and government agencies, industry partners, lots of trainees. We try to develop, to have excellence in developmental neuroscience research, with a focus on what are the impacts and benefits for Canadians, but also to translate internationally. And being here is one attempt to share and listen also from experiences from other countries. So the Child Right Network, SPORE, is another called sister networks, but it's a part of the Canadian program on having what we call patient-oriented research. But patient is a very medical model here. We try to go more with the social model, but the idea is having people who are living the experience of disability. So in the case of children, that includes children and their families, parents and caregivers, as part of the research program. So they really sit with us, just like they're sitting here, to develop the important research questions, to identify what are the best strategies to collect data, to then disseminate the information that we find. And in Child Right, we have 3 priority areas. So our research includes 12 research projects, over 100 researchers as well across Canada who work on these 3 areas: right beginnings, which is about what we can do early, right, to identify issues and to help children develop to their best. Then right supports, so for children who already have a disability and are growing with a disability, what we can do to integrate mental health services and supports into care, supports for families, supports in the community, and testing and studying those, what are the best ways to do that. And also Right Future, so about redesigning the healthcare system in general to be more responsive to the needs of families as children grow older. So when they transition from hospital care to community, and then from childhood to adolescence, from adolescence to adulthood, because that's the beauty of children, right? They grow. And we are trying to develop research that can follow them and that can respond to needs across the lifespan. The research project that we call the Policy Dialogue, it's we wanted to find what is the research out there in rights-based approaches. So how can we promote rights and test and say, as we like to say in research, this works for this population, so that we could translate that information into actual services, into new research questions, into policies, into different directions that we have to take to promote rights for children. What we did then, we searched over the health literature, education, social services, law, and we looked through a specific key term search following a very systematic approach. We started with over 7,000 research articles and select them up until get to the 112 that followed our criteria. And looking especially for what we call key ingredients, so which is really what works, right? If we do want to promote the rights of children with disabilities, what works? What can we do to make sure it happens? And then we conducted a thematic analysis and using both conventions as a framework of reference. So the UN Convention on the Rights of the Children and the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. We refer to those from now on from CRC and CRPD. It's always good to spell out the acronyms. And we then identified what are the issues. So when we when we look at the research, what are the main issues that are brought out as being issues related to rights? What are the indicators? So how can we measure? How can we know that any children in Canada or in any other country is having their rights respected more or less, right? And then more important, what are some solutions that have been tested and validated during the research, okay? Then, very important, okay, there's a bit of a scary moment, the things disappeared. Hold on, I'm sorry about that. A little crash, but we'll be back in 2 seconds. And that the IT person left because they leave at 6, and he said, I hope everything goes well, because we have no backup. There's always something, right? That's the art of improvising. It's like, do you have any non-issues? What usually goes wrong in this room? Okay, that we're good. Okay, so very important, and following along with the nothing for us without us, right? We didn't want just to have the research perspective, but we wanted to make sure that we have the voices of the communities to give perspective to research, because up to now, not all research, or most of the research actually, is not necessarily done in collaboration with people, and that's a problem we're trying to address as well. So we identified, we did a survey with the results that we found on the research literature, and then we sent the survey to parents, to community grassroots organizations, so disability persons organizations, civil society organizations across Canada, And we had over 100 organizations that responded to the survey, parents, and we also did a photo elicitation process to identify what youth with different types of disabilities thought about this perspective. So that's what we're going to present to you, a few of those results, and we will engage in the discussion. So I'll call Jonathan Lee, who is a postdoctoral fellow in the research lab, and he's going to present to you the results of the survey.
Thanks, Keiko. So I'm going to give a really high-level overview of a lot of the research we've been doing on this project. It's going to be a sort of a high-level flyby of what we found. So just to reiterate, what we try to do is look at the voices of the parents and grassroots organizations about the research literature that we found in the publications. So first we asked the parents and the organizations, is this issue a priority? So we came up with 6 issues from those themes, there's 6 of them, and we asked the parents, okay, well, is this a priority? And then they were able to answer either, no, it's not a priority, it's somewhat a priority, it's neutral, it's important, or very important. We grouped them so that the ones that were important or very important were considered yes. So once they got that answer, this statement is a priority for us. We gave them actionable solutions that they could rank from the literature. What are actionable policy solutions that are there? And you're going to rank them according, again, to the importance. Which of these policy solutions do you think are important or very important? So these are parents and grassroots organizations ranking the research evidence. And again, we group them important and very important. So in the next set of slides, what you're going to see are the issue at hand, the priorities, and then also the top ranked actionable solutions that parents and grassroots organizations found. So the first theme that came out of our scoping review, our review of the literature, was that there's a need to identify and measure the barriers to full inclusion to develop policies, programs, and interventions. So that was the issue. So you're going to see the organizations and also the parent rankings in the graph I'm going to show you. So the first actionable item that came up that was ranked highly was measuring inclusion into communities as an indicator of success for intervention. So measuring inclusion. So 93% of organizations saw that as important or very important. And then 95% of parents saw that as important or very important. So that's what those bars are going to represent. The next highly ranked solution was that using international human rights guidelines to guide the standard of services. That was highly ranked by both organizations and parents. The third high-ranking solution was that using international rights guidelines to now evaluate Canadian policies. So for this issue, those are the top 3 solutions. The next issue was that there was a lack of opportunities to participate equally in public life. So here, I'm not going to show the graphs, but the top solutions that were endorsed on this topic, so both 90% for parents and organizations, was first developing strategies that provide physical access to the public to participate in public life, providing adequate levels of resources and services that support health and well-being, and lastly, implementing positive approaches that encourage participation and reduce risk behaviors. So the third issue that came out of the research literature was that there was a lack of ownership and active engagement in decision-making related to children and youth with disabilities. So this is a topic that has come up within this conference a few times already. So again, we asked organizations and parents what were the actionable solutions they thought were relevant in their context. So the first solution that was highly ranked was that raising awareness of rights-based approaches on the social model of disability. That was highly ranked by both parents and organizations. Holding public consultations and policy dialogues with youth and evaluating these programs. And thirdly, developing programs to enable youth to develop self-advocacy skills and to connect with the disability community. And lastly, providing evidence-based strategies to support their advocacy. So the next issue that was identified was that we need strategies and so policies to promote participation in leisure activities, and those were found lacking in the literature. Organizations and parents, and this was highly ranked by all parents, by all the parents who thought this was important, was providing early and cost-effective community-based interventions, developing and implementing policies to promote participation in leisure for children with disabilities, and lastly, training physical education and community leisure providers on strategies to better address specific needs. So the last one, last issue we found in the literature was that there was a lack of integrated and adequate services that place a burden, an economic, psychological, and medical burden on the care of care on families, and especially on women, so on caregivers here. So the top actionable solutions of this one were first to include home care under the Canadian Health Act, and 3 others. So facilitating and supporting community-based professional support services, emphasizing an integrated approach across services that encourage a greater coordination, and lastly, encouraging family involvement with providers during decision-making. So that's a high-level overview. We're happy to give more information, a policy brief that we created to dive into a little more detail for this. So with this, I'm going to pass it on back to Keiko.
So we are in wrapping up to this, so we put together the research that we found into themes, and those were specifically related to the topics that were going to be addressed or that are up for consultation during the development of the Canadian accessibility legislation that is going to happen soon. And we so focused the areas that we found in research that could address issues like access, the built environment, documentation, so accessibility to documentation as well, services, procurement, and transportation. And of course that a lot of the research evidence was focusing on services. That's what a lot of the rights issues came up in the research review. So the types of services that offer, the coordination of care, the quality of care offered, the involvement of stakeholders during the process, and resource distribution, and the legislative support to receive those services. And then on services considering education, health, and social services. So we try to address all of these issues. Then actions that we found that were said in the research, like that works, right? So if you want to promote the rights of children with disabilities, that's what you have to consider. So they are grouped here in the slide. So the first big topic is about universal design, right? So the idea that when you consider universal accessibility, and that's again not an issue that is exclusive for children, it's for any person, right? And you consider the aging population, which is an issue in Canada as it is in other countries. That idea of building environments that are good for everyone seems like an old concept, but it's pretty much something that is tested, tried and true, right? The concept of full citizenship, and that's particularly interesting for children, and when you're thinking of building self-advocacy or how do you build the future that we talk so much, is really giving children the full citizenship rights, right? So giving them the ability to engage, to participate in conversations, but also to learn about what are rights and what they can do as well to contribute to their society, to their community. The lifespan strategy, so not giving too much early and then not enough as they transition to adulthood, but distributing what is offered and making sure that from the moment they're born and their families will have the support to help them thrive and develop all the way through adulthood, right? So this idea that children are going through a development and we must address conditions and environments and build situations and spaces where they can thrive throughout their life. Then measuring successes, it's very important and was highlighted in research. Researchers would like to measure things, right? And that's not something that always happens when we're implementing or programs are happening in community and society, but it's important to measure because that can also provide examples of what's missing and what we can use and go ahead. And using, as Jonathan mentioned, using rights frameworks to support measurement, right? So create measurements that respond to the conventions that will address rights right away and that then can communicate in forms like that. Improve the quality of services, focus on the client and the family, right, in models of care across education, health, and social services. create awareness of people through training and education. So that's population-based awareness. So promote spaces where people can talk, know, and learn how to create and how to, everybody should also contribute to the promotion of rights. Coordinated approach, so multi-agency care, so families feel a lot that they have to transition from one service to the other and figure out all themselves, and we're gonna listen more about that. Having youth engaging and giving agency for youth with disabilities, provide information about rights, and then some more specific details like assistive technology. There was a great side event the other day on assistive technology, also from some programs from Canada. So providing the right technology necessary for people to participate in the activities that they need. Employment, it seems odd to have employment as an issue for children, but it is important because we do want kids to grow and to be productive citizens as well. And financial assistance for families and reasonable accommodations, again, throughout different services and different lifetimes. So the building blocks that we came up with in terms of the research, again, what research said and what parents and community grassroots affirmed as important, is building youth and parent agency, awareness, and engagement, having individual supports and reasonable accommodations in public services in general, using a person and family-centered approach, promoting active citizenship and universal design, and building capacity throughout the different sectors and communities and community spaces. In terms of youth parent and parent agency, awareness and engagement were two important elements. And people said that supporting parenting approaches that will facilitate child's self-agency, so something that we are experimenting research, to have parents empowered so that their children feel empowered, and bottom line, everybody is at the table and participating in the decisions that pertain to themselves. Creating education campaigns to the population and increase cultural relevant services. And Susan will speak a little bit about that too. We have a diversity of families and types of families in Canada, which I'm sure is true around the globe. And that was research coming in from other countries as well. So very international approach to understanding what's relevant in the context of the culture of that family, and design services and policies that go in this way. Active citizenship through universal design, so planning and monitoring infrastructure design to facilitate universal access principles in all areas, so transportation, urban decision making, very important, and for children again, so if you think those are valid for any person, but for children it's important to have those services throughout. Different models like South Africa had a few examples in research of how they included political rights as part of the Constitution, for example, so making sure that legislation and policy documents follow a rights-based approach. And creating databases to share community resources. So that's the little pamphlet you see on your table. The blue one is about, for example, one mobile app that we created. And I can give you a packet up because it was not on this table. But that's one example of a mobile app that we are creating in Canada that lists adapted and inclusive leisure activities across all provinces, so that families have access to this information and they can find easily, and that reduces the burden of finding the best activity for their child. That is true for a lot of information that families have to find. The Joy app is addressing one of these issues, but there are others for sure. Evaluating care, integrating NGOs and BPOs across disability groups, so strengthening advocacy and making sure that people know that how to get the resources they need. Have a horizontal implementation of programs, so across departments, having the issue of children with disabilities be a priority in any development that is being done. One example that I heard today in one of the events was we never ask questions, or yesterday I think at the event, we never have a questionnaire without asking gender or age, right? Basic questions. So we have to make sure that we include children with disabilities as a question to be asked in any document or any question or policy that is developed. And also training for professionals at all levels, right? Both at the decision-making level, at the programming level, and also in the community. So last to wrap up this, and then we'll go to the more interesting part, but we'll listen to people talking about their experiences. We have have, so the vast majority of both organizations and parents emphasize that using human rights language to inform laws, policy, and practice is very important, and also to develop concrete mechanisms for Canada. And then I take the message for research as well, to meet Canada's obligation and to put the CRC and CRPD together and have elements that we can identify. So this was a big message for us, and we are trying now to incorporate more in research to have these indicators that we can report and we can work together to say what we are doing and hopefully be doing a good job in addressing those. So I'll just skip through those because our time is a bit short, but essentially there were examples of families that responded and organizations that responded to our questionnaires. They were saying they have specific quotes on the importance of aspects as seen by their, perceived in their own lives. And also, we know that our panelists will bring this perspective as well. So we wanted to make sure that guidelines and standards of services are taking into consideration the different articles on the convention, and that measurement happens. So that's a quote by a parent: you have to measure the full citizenship. What are the markers of full citizenship? What does it mean, right? And include that in policy. I have the expectation that my children, like all children, will be able to experience the world through whatever means they can accept in order for them to become the best versions of themselves. I love the best versions of themselves. It would be unfair of me and others to make decisions for their outcomes based on what they think is needed. So caregivers are an integral part of what we do and the decisions we have to take. So we would like to emphasize the importance of encouraging family involvement, emphasize the integrated approaches across services to facilitate and support community-based and local development relevant services. So that's what came across very strong in the research. So Jonathan already mentioned the importance of leisure, and perhaps I'll just wrap up this quote, that there are, the recreation is very important for all children. When we think of children, we think of play. Many children, spend the phys ed class keeping score. They're unable to play or to choose the activities. Playground equipment sometimes lacking adaptations, and supports to participate in leisure in the community. Last but not least, the youth voices that we've heard, and that's a summary of, so we ask youth to take pictures of their daily lives, and those are children with a variety of disabilities, including physical, intellectual, sensory impairments as well. And they were asked to get a camera and tell us with images what inclusion, what rights meant for them, what their human rights were by translating pictures, and then they talked to us about that. So the summary of that is accessibility to physical spaces and to information, opportunities to participate in the community and active living, reduce social stigma and tolerance from the part of others, and also transportation. So those are young, older adolescents, young adults, from 14 to 17, so they were particularly concerned with the transportation issue and the lack of ability to choose where to come and go. So we'll listen to Liam in a minute, but one of the youth who participated in our study wrote a poem, and he said, Keiko, can you please read our poem? Make sure you read my poem. So we'll read his poem. So that's Nico's poem. He said, I get frustrated in my wheelchair when I can't get everywhere. When an elevator is out of commission, it spoils my shopping mission. I sometimes need my Uncle Mike to get me to a store. He lifts my wheelchair up so I can shop some more. I get frustrated in my wheelchair when I can't get everywhere. So in essence, for Nico, and Nico used an assistive device, and he was one other youth that was coming but couldn't come last minute too. But for him, which is him in this picture, his rights are really related to the ability to make choices. And I really wanted to emphasize that having a voice, regardless of the resources that you need to have a voice, and having the chance to make choices in your everyday life, those are the essence of the understanding of rights for children and youth, as we've heard in this project. So with that in mind, I will invite Nicholas, another Nico, by coincidence, to speak to us on his perspectives on we've had this discussion, and I will ask you to give your short bio because I lost the file as we were talking. So just introduce yourself and to the podium. Thank you.
All right, thanks everyone for coming this evening. So my name is Nick Harris. I'm from the East Coast of Canada, from Dartmouth, and I am a Canadian Youth Delegate this year with the official Canadian delegation. And I'm here today just to touch on a few of my experiences with childhood disability. I was diagnosed with juvenile idiopathic arthritis when I was 22 months old, and as such I've been living with arthritis for over 22 years. Now looking at me, you may not even be able to tell that I struggle with chronic pain and inflammation flares associated with my arthritis. And for me, my disability falls into the realm of invisibility. The impact of arthritis that it's had on my life is difficult to fully quantify, but I've learned from a very early age that I had to adapt myself to fit into the normative standards. It was that, and also learning that I needed to align myself with individuals with similar experiences. I was searching for identity and searching for community. The unique thing with juvenile arthritis is the complexity of social stigmas regarding invisible disability and the daily changing roller coaster-like symptoms and the impacts of arthritis. And of course, the elderly connotation that often follows with having an arthritis diagnosis and being a child. This is even more compounded when you're also going through the regular struggles of growing up and figuring out who you are. Living with arthritis means that the day-to-day has its challenges: joint stiffness, fatigue, knee pain, and then you look at the progression of young onset to now. I've experienced a wide range of systems from my childhood and now into my adulthood. I can say that navigating the systems as a child and youth was challenging, and a large portion of it was simply not knowing what resources or supports I could access or what I had a right to access. But thankfully I was privileged to have a very supportive individuals in my life, such as my family and friends, who were very understanding and validating of my experiences and struggles. But I'm left wondering what we can do to better raise the awareness of the range of supports that are available and the rights that we have as people with disabilities. An important aspect of living with a disability has been being provided the opportunity to grow and develop an understanding of independence and self-management. I wanted to be able to manage my own health from a really early age, and I took charge of the opportunities that had been provided to me. This meant that at a certain age, which is now being looked at more as the transitionary period in health, I began to engage directly with my healthcare team. I was given the opportunity to have discussions and talk about my health and have that direct interaction. Not only did the physicians start addressing me directly, but they often stepped in to provide a space for me as the youth to engage and have a say in my care. And that was huge. If I could recommend anything, it would definitely be for all youth to be provided with that power and that autonomy to engage in their own health care and achieve that realized person-centered model. Because you're the expert of yourself. What's happening in the right here and right now, you know it the best. So why shouldn't you have a say? In addition to this is the ability to self-represent. So by this I mean often being engaged in numerous projects and providing my disability lens to help raise the understandings for others, much like the opportunity here today. As I mentioned, there's a transitionary period in pediatric health when you switch into adult health systems. This transition occurs often during stressful times in the lives of youth. Not only are individuals transferring to different health systems, they're also transitioning to the next phase of their lives in areas such as post-secondary education, developing their skills, or entering the workforce. It's during this period in which supports are needed to assist in providing the awareness of available supports and promote overall success along the continuum. So in Canada, we have things like the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, along with the Human Rights Acts, provincially and federally, that outline that individuals in Canada cannot be discriminated against for having a disability, and opportunities should be taken to ensure that equal opportunities provided so that we can all live our lives in a full way. This helps guide things like accommodation and accessibility practices in areas such as post-secondary and employment sectors, and we have a right to accommodation in areas such as these. So one thing that worked really well for me during these, due to these inclusions in our Human Rights Acts in Canada, was being able to access the disability supports and accommodation services through post-secondary education and also in my workplace. However, the caveat is that you must know about the services in order to access the services. So I began my post-secondary journey not fully knowing what rights and rights to support I had into accommodation, and missed out on accessing some of those services for the majority of my first year of post-secondary education. So it was a local nonprofit that actually discussed this with me and prompted my exploration of this with my school, which was an immense support. It's an interesting aspect of the continuum of care for those who are growing up with a disability, just to keep that in mind, that after we're through the pediatric systems, there's much more on the other end. Once I was finally connected with those supports, I was able to access things like the Canadian Student Grants for Persons with Permanent Disabilities program, and that assisted in reducing financial burdens for post-secondary education, especially when you're living with a disability and there's costs associated in addition, such as medications or extra treatments or different modalities like that. So in addition to this, I was able to also access the student grants for services for equipment for students with permanent disabilities. So that allowed me to have funding to access assistive technology. So that allowed me to get a computer, and that allowed me to then effectively record lecture notes, complete assignments, and access PDF versions of my textbooks, which were very heavy. These aspects of supports are available for post-secondary students, and they've been an immense help for me. There's also been a large uptake in relation to the meaningful engagement, and I say meaningful engagement, so not just being engaged, but actually having a role and making change. So we're seeing more and more youth involved in committees, organizations, and events across the country. So being here today is because Canada believes there's value in bringing their youth to the UN and to hear what's happening, to learn and to engage and to speak and share ideas. And another example back at home, our local children's hospital has a youth advisory council that is involved in decisions and initiatives and have the ability to support what's happening and support the rights of those that are in the hospital. An area that I'm currently researching through my master's of social work is the impact of camp for kids with arthritis. In Nova Scotia, we have a facility that provides an accessible and medically supportive environment for children living with various disabilities. And the Camp for Kids with Arthritis is called Camp Join Together, and it's a chance for youth with similar experiences to come together and access camp without worrying about activity adaptation or requests for accommodation or having to manage their medication. So I've been involved with camp over the last 6 years as a volunteer counselor, and through that camp I also share my experiences with arthritis as a peer mentor. So building bonds with campers and helping them see that they can live well with arthritis. And the younger campers have shared how important it's been for them to see people thriving while growing up with arthritis, as it takes away some of those fears and those unknowns of invisible illness. By enacting a sharing circle activity at camp, I aim to promote peer-to-peer bonds, so that sharing of experiences with other campers, and along with that, more campers started to share, and it grew into a large discussion about all the impacts of arthritis and what the day-to-day looks like and what the challenges are. And for many of these youth, that's one of the first times that they've ever had a discussion like that they've ever been able to connect with another person that kind of just knows what's happening or has that deeper connection. And it's kind of developed this collective sharing of stories and coping tools and self-management strategies, and has led to discussions about, how to interact with a healthcare team, which is incredible to see. So it's through Camp Join Together that these campers are often even experiencing camp for the first time, being able to have somewhere that they don't have to worry about the medications, that they don't have to worry about sitting out in activities and having people look at you. And the campers often know that they're going to camp with the support of the entire camp. It's a collective. So there's no strange looks when you take medications or if you have to sit down and take a rest. You're met with acceptance, understanding, and it's a thriving community that's developed from these initiatives. And I just wanted to share that as an example. So my aim overall is to increase the awareness of childhood disability, and specifically also childhood arthritis, as a far impacting health condition that impacts many youth. By exploring the experiences of camp through my thesis, I'm hoping to uncover what the meaning of these experiences are for the campers and for the kids. So initially, they've highlighted the importance of meeting peers living with similar experiences as being very, very impactful and just rewarding in terms of finally having that validation, especially living with invisible illness. So my hope is, by engaging in this dialogue and exploring the narratives, my small study can begin the process of effectively sharing the experiences of youth living with disability. So I'm working closely with the Arthritis Society in Nova Scotia and also working on chairing a new committee. So this committee has consisted of individuals impacted by arthritis and aims to develop a peer network and support a program that will provide young adults and youth a place to connect with people who understand and kind of work to develop those important skills that they need to thrive into adulthood. So it just includes a clear understanding of what the supports are that are out there and what the rights for individuals are. And like I said, the committee is comprised of individuals that are living with arthritis that have lived these experiences and are going to be directly involved in tailoring what this kind of looks like and how it kind of progresses. So in closing, I feel that we really need to have the right services and the right support offered at the right times. Not only this, but ensuring that they're reflective of the individuals that are seeking support. So engaging in practices that are person-centered, that are actively acknowledging the intersectionality of our experience and how impactful that is, and the focus on the individual as an expert in their own care. So we can shift our thinking and raise the value of the disability lens and give power to those who are often left powerless. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Nicholas. That was excellent. Thank you so much for this overview. So I'll call then Susan Susan Cosgrove. She is our parent mentor at the Child Right Network, and she can introduce herself also a bit more, Susan. But so I'd like to just share the experience of parenting and what we can also do in this front.
Thank you, Kiko. I'm not going to take too much time to introduce myself because really I think my story is going to do that in itself. Basically, I do live in Toronto with my 3 kids, and I'll tell you a little bit more about them as we go through the story. When I was 25 years old, I had my first child. I knew at that time that my life would change, but I had no idea how intensely my trajectory had been rerouted. Liam was an adorable baby, but also a challenging one. He was tense, irritable, and sensitive to touch and sound. By the time he was 2.5 years old, shortly after his baby sister Kaya was born, he was diagnosed with autism. Through reading, research, and connecting with other parents, I began to learn about the rights of both of my children. As it turned out, their rights were exactly the same. As Canadian children, they both had the right to quality health care, to worship as they choose, to fully participate into society, and to exist in the public space without discrimination. It didn't take me long to understand that ensuring these rights for my son was going to be a much bigger job than ensuring them for my daughter. As Liam grew, his symptoms of autism became more disruptive. We frequently found ourselves the subject of stares, comments, and even anger when he became overwhelmed in public. I became an advocate by circumstance, reminding those around us that Liam can and will be fully included in this society. That we as Canadians and our government have the obligation to ensure that his rights as a child were always available to him. Was that a lot of work? Sure. Was it hard for his sister to understand growing up? Absolutely. The process of ensuring Liam's rights as he grew through childhood created personal and professional conflicts that I never expected, some of which I never overcame. When Liam was 10 and Kaya was 8, we welcomed the final member of our special family, baby Phoenix. So different than his big brother in so many ways, Phoenix was easygoing and affectionate, in love with his family and numbers and letters. As he grew, it became clear that this interest in these things was actually a special interest, and in fact a symptom of autism. When he was diagnosed at just 21 months, my sadness surprised me. I had always thought that if autism happened again, it would be easier, just kind of slide right into our lifestyle. But that it was not. It was scary because I knew what I was getting into. I knew that my life had suddenly become so much more complicated, and that complexity was a permanent part of my life. I would not exactly say that I embraced this new lifestyle quickly or easily. I tried to hold on to a career that obviously no longer worked for my family. I found myself avoiding friends who didn't live a similar lifestyle and seeking out those who did. I found myself attracted to disability research. I wanted to learn what was happening to further the quality of life for my children, my family, and those like us. Through my local children's rehabilitation hospital, I became a family leader. I was given the opportunity to influence healthcare providers, researchers, stakeholders, and even policymakers in Toronto, in Ontario, and beyond. My life and career goals had evolved. My friendships with other parents like myself became a staple of my survival. I surrounded myself with people who neither pitied me nor idolized me. I was drawn to people who thought that my life was just another version of normal. It was during this time that I would meet a lady who affected my view of the rights of children with disabilities so profoundly that I asked her if I could talk about her journey here today. She kindly agreed to let me tell her story. So let me tell you about my friend Annie. Annie is a new Canadian. She has a loving husband and 2 beautiful sons named Mahad and Zayn. They live in the same high-rise building in Toronto as I do. Just like my sons, both of hers have autism. They are Canadian children with all of the rights and protections that come with that status. Despite living far, far away from her family and not having grown up learning the rights of Canadian children like I did, Annie is an advocate for her boys, but she is at a disadvantage. People in a position of authority often assume that she does not know the rights of her children, and frequently they choose to take advantage of that belief, making decisions for her children while not fully informing her of their rights. Sometimes even avoiding telling her those rights to ensure that things go as planned. The first time Annie and I found ourselves advocating for our children together was when Liam was in 8th grade and Mahad in 2nd. They rode the school bus together. They even shared a seat. The rest of the bus was filled with boys their age attending a different school. These children did not have a disability and sadly spent many bus rides bullying our boys. Spitballs were thrown. Both boys were subject to slurs and insults. Well aware of Liam's rights, I took my mama bear self to the right people, and said the right things. Nobody invited me. Nobody offered to help. But as a Canadian familiar with the disability system, I knew what to do. Within a few days, Liam was on a new bus, and the experience was just a memory. But they left Mahad behind. Why? When both children were victims of bullying, the subjects of such disturbing behavior, why was Liam removed from the situation and Mahad left to deal with it alone? A small boy with autism unable to stand up for himself? The answer is sad and simple. I knew how to fight for my child's rights, while Annie did not. Not because she loves her children any less and any completely than I do, she lives for her children. But because nobody told her that she had the ability to enforce the rights of her children and direct her on how to make it happen. So they left Mahad behind. The next time I saw Annie, she told me that Mahad was still on the bus and he was still suffering bullying. I wrote down for her a phone number and an email address. With these very simple tools, Annie advocated for her boy and he was transferred to a new bus. Annie told me she was lucky to know me, that I had helped her so much, but all I had done was inform her of Mahad's rights and who to contact to enforce them. It concerned me to realize that I have a privilege that Annie does not. Awareness of my family's rights. My children don't have any more rights than hers do. We just have the privilege of knowing how to attain them. Do people look at me, hear me speak articulately, and automatically assume I know my rights? Absolutely. It was this experience that first opened my eyes to the absolute necessity for parent-to-parent mentoring, which recently became my occupation. Child Right Research Network is a Canada-wide network that connects parents, families, researchers, clinicians, and stakeholders, and policymakers from all over Canada. By way of patient-oriented research and family-focused approaches, they work to create novel interventions to optimize development, promote health outcomes, and deliver responsive and supportive services that have the potential to change the lives of children with brain-based disorders and their families. As Child Right's first ever professional parent mentor, I have had the opportunity to connect with parents from across Canada. I am interested in special families. I aim to connect them with the network and with each other, and as a mentor to be able to help them be as influential as they can possibly be in their children's future healthcare and opportunities. By creating a network of parents, we are stronger and we are more aware. Our combined knowledge can create the brightest possible future for our children. A future where they live their Canadian dream, whatever that might be. I recently had the honor of seeing Annie advocate for her child once again. Her younger son, Sweet Zane, was struggling at school, where he felt overwhelmed and he would lash out, feeling the need to protect himself in this big, scary world. Annie knew that he needed a different placement, somewhere that his physical needs could be met so that his body could be relaxed and his mind open to learning. Once again, all she needed was the right phone number and to use her voice to ensure her son's rights. I watched with admiration as she advocated her way through the scary Toronto school system and obtained for her boy the best placement that she, as his mother, knew he needed. I was even more thrilled to learn that her Sweet Zane and my little Phoenix will be classmates in September. I hope that they can be friends just like their mothers. The day after his placement was finalized, Annie texted me. She said, "I feel a little lost today. What am I going to worry about? What battle do I need to fight?" I replied that maybe she should enjoy a quiet tea, possibly a nap. The next battle will come along soon enough, but it will be no match for her. For she has the power of knowledge, the strength of connection, and the love of her children. I wonder if she knows how much I have learned from her, how humbled I am by her strength. Because I am the privileged one, and I will forever be grateful to know her. Thank you. So now I am very, very blessed to introduce you to another hero of mine, my oldest son, Liam. Liam wants you to know that although he will be reading while he speaks, every word he says is his own. He asked me to let you know that sometimes his words get jumbly. If or when that happens, he will stop and he will take a deep breath. Or maybe two. He appreciates your patience with this process. I've been asked to share a little bit about how Liam writes a speech, as he is an incredibly experienced self-advocate. I want to show you something that one of our team members was given when we arrived at this conference earlier this week. This is the easy read Conference of the State Parties to the Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. It's basically a social story. It's not dumbed down. It's not written for people who can't understand. It's simply written in a logical fashion with the most important information shared in an organized way. I'd like to give credit that the document was created by the Council for Intellectual Disabilities with support from the Australian government and civil society. This is amazing. Liam and I took every piece of information from his speech from this book. We read through it together and saw his understanding grow enough that he's able to now come up here and tell you about his rights. So it's my absolute pleasure to bring my boy Liam up here.
Let's do this thing. Yeah, I believe. Ready? Voila. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Liam. I'm from Toronto, Canada, and I have autism. My favorite thing about being Canadian is our heritage and history. I especially love to visit the Canadian Warplane Heritage Museum, which is in Hamilton, Ontario. There's classic World War II planes there, real life ones. In Canada, I have many rights. In Canada, children have many rights, such as the right to education, the freedom to explore, the right to have friends, and choices in our medical care. In Canada, children with disabilities have all of these rights, just the same as kids who don't have a disability. Autism is an invisible disability, so often self-identify as a person with a disability to people like doctors, bus drivers, and civil servants. I do this so that people understand that I need extra help that others may not. Growing up with autism can be hard. Sometimes I feel judged by people who don't want to learn about me, but if they took the time to learn about me, they would think I was a cool guy. Children with autism are important. We are not more or less important than children who don't have autism. We're simply equal. Living in equality is a lot of work for us, for our caregivers, and sometimes for society. But that's okay, it's alright. All kids have hopes and dreams. I dream of being an auto mechanic because I have a good knowledge about cars. I think I'll need some help to get this job. I have some trouble with fine motor skills, so I may need help with things like lug nuts. I'll need lots of training and schooling, a good mentor, and support from my family. But I know that I can do it. I will build my skills with lots of practice and training. I will practice my fine motor skills until I get it right. When I am a grown-up mechanic with autism, I will have many rights, especially the right to vote. I will use my vote to elect a government that ensures that I can have a career that I enjoy, join organizations that I care about, get married and have a family, and live my Canadian dream. Thank you all for coming all the way to New York City to learn from me and hear my story. Yeah, I rocked it.
Good job, and thank you so much. Thank you.
You're very welcome, Keiko.
My pleasure. It was really great to hear from you. That's how we've been building on to this moment, and you see Liam's all dressed up on Canadian colors. We're a very organized team.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. That was excellent for you. And I'd like then to call our last panelist, Rachel Martins. Rachel is a parent as well. Like, this is the title we're going with, and that's a great title. And she's a parent that participates in several projects, and she will tell more about that and Kids Friendly Health Network. And it has been my pleasure to be this week with you all. So, thank you, Rachel.
Now for myself, I'm in a bit of a Mennonite background, so when it comes to the idea of having a little bit of anxiety as a person, I'm just picturing us all at my kitchen table having pizza tonight. So. Thank you for being here this evening. My name is Rachel Martins, and I'm from Calgary, Alberta, Canada. Becoming a mom to a child with multiple disabilities presents a sort of duality in your identity. This duality has a system of priorities that at times works in tandem, and sometimes works with one side taking priority over the other. Both sides of this dual identity have a stake in introducing my son today. Clinician mom gets the first go at things. she would tell you that this is Luke. Born with a rare chromosome disorder called mosaic trisomy 22, he was born with a laundry list of associated diagnoses such as autism, cerebral palsy, poor growth, as well as being nonverbal. Mosaic trisomy 22 can be best determined with current data occurs roughly in about 1 in 30,000 to 50,000 live births, essentially. It was only in 2013, actually, with Canadian research that a published formal assessment of data determined that mosaic trisomy 22 didn't follow the common trajectory of other diagnoses often associated with incompatibility with life, but rather it falls on the spectrum of function and lifespan unique to the individual. In sharing my story, I often feel as though he was born at a time in transition in conversations with both medicine and disability. This is a young man who craves his own path on every level. I credit the work of multiple clinics at Alberta Children's Hospital for the fact that Luke is still with us today. The other identity, well, we'll just call her Mom. She would tell you that Luke is an almost 12-year-old young man. For someone who's nonverbal, he sure gets his point across really easy when he's annoyed with you. He's an active explorer who doesn't let using a wheelchair get in the way of experiencing his own world. He loves to play what he considers to be pranks. He considers himself quite hilarious. And music has recently become another way for him to communicate with the world. Starting out, I really feel like I won the lottery when it came to our early intervention team of occupational and speech and physiotherapists. They saw a very angry child with a unique path of development. They acknowledged his need for space and autonomy, all the while working to create bridges towards a trusting therapeutic relationship that helped him see that the world is a much less scary place. All this couldn't have happened without a supportive Canadian framework of services that became a regular part of our home life. As Luke approached school age, I could tell that his team was hesitant about his future. At the time, all we could be best afforded for school was a life skills class. None of us were satisfied, let alone equipped to advocate for an education that better suited his list of needs. It was with that we decided to pick up and move to another province so that we could be closer to family and a school that afforded him more opportunity to grow. Looking back, I am fully aware that this decision to move was available to us due to a remarkable amount of privilege. Many families with complex needs like my son's have an added stress of functioning in a support system that's inaccessible due to diagnosis-centric standards or don't qualify at all because they're not considered disabled enough for intervention. In any case, parenting is a dance that's led by the child. The music is entirely their own. The partners change every now and then, and it's an absolute thing of beauty to watch when each part is understood and works to support the artistry of the lead dancer. I do a lot of looking back on my life with my family lately. What brought us to this point, raising a young man who's developing his own identity, engaging with the world, came with a recognition of his right to education, surrounding him with people who are open to communication and strategy in a system that supports the individual. The stories of Canadian families represent a broad expanse of experiences, but at the root of parenting a child with a disability, I would argue that we all carry a common system of goals for our kids. In 2012, two researchers at CanChild, Centre for Childhood Disability in Hamilton, Ontario, created a simplified explanation for parents of the World Health Organization's International Classification of Functioning, Disability, and Health. Well, we can call it the ICF for short. We like acronyms here. This is what I'm learning. The parents' version of the title was actually called the 6 F Words of Disability, which are words that don't fit in the swear jar. Which I believe actually they do reflect the spirit of the CRPD in the lives of families. And a brief explanation is as follows. Function. I may do things differently, but please let me try. Family. Mine plays a supporting role in my life. Please give them an opportunity to have a voice too. They're my biggest fans. Fitness. Please help me find ways to keep healthy. Friends. Connections with others is important to my development. Please help me find ways to hang out with my peers. Fun. Fun and play is how I learn and grow. Please help me find ways to be a kid. Future. I will grow up one day. Please help me to find ways to be a part of the community. It has been my absolute pleasure to share these words with Canadian families as a parent engagement coordinator for CanChild, as well as Kids Brain Health Network. I facilitate a social media-based advisory network for families engaged and willing to participate in research. Stories, according to researcher and author Brené Brown, in fact, she considers them to be data with a soul. And at the heart of these stories, we have seen the common thread that we share in supporting the dance of our kids. We have spent the past few years getting to know what sort of connection we can make together in the creation of research that has real life application and has seen the benefits of real-time knowledge exchange in an era where when science is making a deeper impact, it's due to the fact that scientists are actually taking the knowledge to the streets, to the people who need it. It was through this online community that we collectively celebrated the implementation of the position of Minister for Disability and Sport and cast a vision towards the future. More accessible collaboration has the potential to engage with greater depth beyond the time restrictions of a clinic appointment and notice sometimes the subtle nuances of child development through the eyes of the kids and the parents and the siblings who know them so well. In my work in engaging parents, I see a generation of them who are seeking a way to step beyond both the physical and mental stress. They see potential and carry ideas as to what would help create one amazing generation of children. They mentor each other on system navigation, on social media, that in a way makes them as though they are well-studied social workers for one another. And when you invite researchers into this community as well, the combination of lived experience and scientific knowledge has the potential to create incredible outcomes. I realize that engagement isn't always logistically accomplished with a level of intimacy and conversation equitable to a family barbecue, as much as I'd like to try one day. But it's the spirit of community that is already a uniquely Canadian quality. In order to realize the full depth and breadth of the CRPD and its function in Canada, this community of the mutually invested needs to be mobilized. If I were afforded an opportunity to provide insights into supporting the implementation of the CRPD for kids in Canada, there'd be a few things that I would consider. I would create an assurance that all voices count in the creation of new policy. And that means creating population counts for all Canadians affected by disability, including children and hardly reached cultures. I'd consider seeking a rare disease framework and how it affects disability support system infrastructure, as it affects 1 in 12 Canadians, and 2/3 of them, in fact, are children. I would encourage more networking between the provinces regarding analysis of best practices for services. I would seek to close the often considerable time gap between published research and the implementation into policy. And I would educate families in seeing that their story, in fact, has value in research, and understanding that organizations like SPORE help in opening doors to collaboration with research institutions. Meaningful collaboration in improving the lives of kids has been tremendously therapeutic for myself. The knowledge acquired has trickled down into my parenting and helped me advocate for Luke with less conflict and much more evidence basis. Oh, the video didn't come. Okay. Oh, no worries. On days like today, having an opportunity to speak on behalf of Canadian families is larger thinking than I ever really could have imagined. When I think of, especially when I first became a mom, this is something that was entirely new to me. The video that unfortunately didn't work, but I can tell you a little bit about it. My son has an obsession with the movie, not the movie Moana, but one specific song. And he has low engagement on a lot of functional things, but for some reason something in his brain kicked in and he said, "This is the most beautiful song that has ever been created." And so beyond that, if you are sitting there and listening to it with him and you're not paying attention, he will make sure that you are. He will pinch you, or he will grab you by the face, pull it over, and basically warn you to share my joy. This is beautiful. You are witnessing a magical moment here. And it's stories like these that drive parents towards being partners for change, as it's the energy with the potential to fuel the creation of really great things. When we can support the rights of children, making memories like this as a family becomes a celebration of milestones that we can all share in and celebrate together. I, for one, cannot wait to see what we can accomplish as a country for our kids. Thank you for letting me share my family with you today.
Thank you so much, Rachel. I'm sorry that we didn't come, but that was excellent. I guess we all agree. And I would like to invite the Honorable Minister to give us some closing thoughts. This is a bit of an improvisation, but she asked to talk again, and we would love to hear your thoughts. And also, for after that, I know we're short in time. But if you have questions and other short discussion before we close, that would be very welcome. But first, please, if you could do it, John, do it from here. Do you want to come up here?
How about I do it from here? Can you all hear me?
Yep.
And I hope I do it justice. Again, let me say thank you for having me. I am so grateful to have been here to listen. Dr. Shikeko Thomas, thank you for the research. And Jonathan, we thank you both. And to Kids Brain Health and Child Bright. Thank you for the discussion on rights. The CRC and the CRPD, nothing about us without us. I'm not going to go through all the research. I made copious notes, whether it was measuring inclusion, whether it was using international human rights guidelines to guide services. But to ask that we ensure that our children thrive from birth to thriving throughout their life. Person and family-centered approach. This comment broke my heart. I should tell you, I've worked with children with disabilities all my life. The best lessons I ever learned were from two-year-olds. They were twin brothers, Johnny and Jason, and I was 10. And I went every day to spend time with them at our school, and it set up a life of working with your beautiful, beautiful children. But seeing, when we think of children, we think of play, we think of laughter, not being in phys ed class, keeping score. And I would love a copy of Nico's poem. Nick, we're so proud to have you on this delegation. And we're so proud to have Robert. And Aunt Sophie, we invited you because you are such tremendous leaders. And you're both doing great research. Hearing you talk about searching for identity and community. And you and Robert have worked so hard to then build community, both of you. You talked about camp being a thriving community and a sharing circle for peer-to-peer bonds. I really appreciated your story. I appreciate your research and the leadership you're taking in our country. I have one small thing I disagree with. you're not allowed to talk about your small study. Your research matters. And I can't wait to hear your results. Thank you. To Susan, thank you for sharing your story and that of Annie, Mahat, and Zane. And that Zane and Phoenix will now be together as Liam and Mahat were in the school bus. Thank you for the work you do with parents. And we know how hard you have to fight. You have to fight so hard. I've worked with kids with autism all my life. In our community, we have 2 Somali autism organizations. 2. And I can tell you, parents coming in and the Christmas Eve that I spent madly looking for help for a family with 2 sons. Thank you. Liam, first of all, we think you're a super cool guy. Yes? And yes, you are equal. And all kids have hopes and dreams. I love that you want to be a mechanic. Can I share a story?
Oh yes, of course you can.
I'm terrible with cars. I am terrible. And I'm always looking for a good mechanic.
I'm gonna be your one.
And someone who can deal with lug nuts, because I have a real problem with them.
Yeah, if there's like 4 lug nuts on the wheel of the car, you go in a crisscross pattern. It's different if the wheel of the car has 5 lug nuts.
See, I've learned something already.
Yeah.
Can I ask everyone before we continue this wrap up? There's a young man who has a birthday, I believe, on Friday.
This guy right here.
Oh, yeah, buddy.
I think from Canada.
This guy right here.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Liam. Happy birthday to you. I'm sorry to interrupt the wrap up, but we celebrate amazing young people and we recognize their birthdays. To Rachel, thank you for telling us about Luke, and I will remember that picture in the water, and I want to know what that song is that brings such joy to Luke. Your words that parenting is a dance that's led by a child. The 6 F words of disability: function, family, fitness, friends, fun, and future. I liked you talking about lived experience, and when we can bring research together, we will get incredible outcomes. And to the incredible researchers that are here today, we have ones coming behind with Robert and with Nick. And yes, your stories have value. I can't say thank you enough. And what I will share with you is we had hoped by the time we would come here, we would have introduced our legislation, and I know you are all waiting on it. It's coming. It's coming. I want to say thank you to all of you. The community has advocated for decades, And my predecessor, the amazing Minister Carla Qualtrough, led a consultation, and I know many of you fed in. It was the largest and the most accessible consultation in Canadian history. And 6,000 Canadians gave of their time and of their effort. And we're using that consultation in days like this to inform the legislation. It is your legislation. It is your work. It is legislation that we hope that will break down barriers and increase opportunities for persons with disabilities, for Canadians with disabilities. But because of your leadership, it will help all Canadians. We will look at the built environment, communication, employment, procurement, services, transportation. Where I worry about two things. When one brings in accessible legislation, I want Parliament to be accessible. And we're doing everything we can to make it accessible. But I think the reason we need this legislation is to make change. The other thing I worry about when people come into my constituency office, they want change now. They don't want change in a week, in a year. And it's going to take time. The other thing people don't want, they don't want to hear, this is federal, this is provincial, this is municipal. I want to make clear, this legislation is the legislation we can do at the federal level. And it will affect things in federal jurisdiction. But we hope we take a leadership position. We'll work with the provinces and territories. I wish I had better words to say thank you.
We feel it.
From the team that's with me, and I want to acknowledge our Deputy Minister, Laurie Sterling, and perhaps Laurie can give a wave, and Mary Jose, who is the Manager of Partnerships and Engagement Unit for the Office for Disability Issues. With that, please accept my sincere thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
That was pretty fun.
So glad you're here. So thank you so much, Mr. Duncan, for this amazing words. A great summary of what we discussed. I'm just back at the mic, so it's captured. And I think it illustrates for our colleagues not from Canada who are around the room a little bit of the examples and strategies and actions that we are trying to take in different directions. So I think this is also a great example of collaborations and partnerships, how when we come together we are better and we can do amazing things. It's my great privilege to have you all here. Thank you so much for taking